Watching Minions and Monsters was definitely one of the best things I did this year. And you probably feel the same way. But did you manage to catch all the hidden secrets in this movie that makes us laugh from beginning to end?
An example of this, which practically nobody noticed, happens when the Minions are at Dort's apartment, who becomes the Minions' new big boss after he accidentally knocks out 4 gang bullies who were tormenting cosplayers at a sci-fi convention. When the little yellow guys get to the place, we can see that the apartment is extremely small. And on top of that, Dort shares it with Lloyd, a guy who spends all his time reading a fake news newspaper that says everyone is getting rich doing absolutely nothing. Anyway, the detail here is that the place is so cramped that we can see the clothesline is right in the middle of the apartment, between what looks like the living room and the kitchen at the same time. And if you look closely, you'll notice that among the clothes hanging on the line, there is a single pair of red pants, right? So the mistake happens when, right after that, Dort goes into the bathroom and gives his final instructions to the Minions. And when the scene changes angles, we can see that the pants that were less than 1 second ago above the Minions' heads are now completely blocking both eyes of one of the Minions. But how is that even possible if there was only 1 pair of pants hanging there and it was way too high to do that? Honestly, I couldn't make heads or tails of these pants, even though it was pretty funny to see the Minion completely blinded by them. My question now is, could he be the same Minion from the other mistake we're about to tell you right now? This second logic error happened when the Minions were crossing the desert. After sleeping under the starlight and the moon and using rocks as pillows, the next day, Dick, the most unlikable Minion I've ever seen, and probably you've ever seen too, starts picking on Henry and James once again. Henry then gets up and goes after Dick, but Ed ends up breaking them up. However, the one who actually ends up punching that annoying Minion with 1 less tooth is Ed, who can't stand listening to his nagging anymore. Then a full-blown brawl breaks out, and Dick himself ends up bumping right into one of the Minions who was frying an egg. And after that, this Minion ends up with 2 eggs stuck to his face, one on each lens of his goggles. But how did he end up with 2 eggs on his face if before Dick fell on top of him, he was only frying 1 egg? Please explain this to me, Illumination, because my brain is breaking. Are the Minions capable of performing miracles? Like the multiplication of eggs? Yep, Minions movies are great, but nobody's perfect. Get ready, because we are going to blow your mind today. Right after the full-blown Minion brawl begins, another mistake happens that, unfortunately, our lack of empathy for others ended up keeping us from noticing. Didn't catch that? Hold on, we'll explain it all to you. During the Minions' fist fight among themselves, Dick, always him, ends up spotting a bank robber who is fleeing on horseback from the sheriff and his deputies, holding a bag full of money. The Minions get super excited because they finally managed to find a new big boss, which is what they call their villain bosses. So altogether, they manage to steal the police officers' horses and keep chasing their great boss. After all that, they end up reaching the train where they keep chasing the bank robber, who was actually just an actor. When they get to the front part of the train, in the locomotive, we can see one of the 2 main Minions of the movie, Henry, just falling right on top of the engineer. So far, so good. The detail is that right after, if you put the scene in slow motion, you'll notice that out of nowhere, Henry simply pulls James up. But how is that possible if only Henry jumped on top of him? Worst of all, after that, the engineer vanishes after the Minions fall on him, not even showing up after the locomotive fell to pieces before colliding with the live-action actors of the movie, and with the other Minions who were there too. After all, where did the poor man go? And actually, there's another brutal mistake that ends up happening in this exact same sequence of scenes. Look closely. To prevent the collision, Henry pulls the brake lever with all the strength he has, and it actually works, and the train doesn't run anyone over. However, if we go back a little, we'll remember that the cargo the train was pulling consisted of wooden logs split in half that are loose right behind the locomotive in front. Then the Minions start swerving around people in the streets, just going from one side of the locomotive to the other. So far, so good. The strange detail is that even swinging from side to side, the same wood we mentioned stays right there, firm and strong, without falling to one side or the other. And the proof that the wood was still there, even after everything, is right behind Henry and James when they hit the emergency brake. Honestly, it would be completely impossible for this to happen in real life. Don't you agree? The question that remains is, was that wood shipment just a prop too? That's what it looks like. If you're enjoying the video, subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss any new videos. When the minions are tagging along with their temporary boss, the robot, on his romantic date, the girl asks him to try his luck at winning a really big teddy bear. And notice that right next to the owner of the game booth, there are some lollipops that are practically sweet versions of the minions, since they are yellow and have one white eye. Now that is what I call making a self-reference in a totally perfect way. Another detail that practically no one who watched the movie noticed is that during the scene where the train derails right in the middle of downtown, the minions managed to stop the locomotive from hitting a mother and her baby. But if you go to the scenes from that same date we just mentioned between the robot and his sweetheart, if you look in the background, you will see once again that the exact same stroller with the exact same design, details, and colors is sitting at one of the game booths. Another hidden detail is in the scene that happens right after the minions get kicked off the movie set. They run into a kid who had 3 customers getting their shoes shined, and all 3 of them are reading newspapers. But the funniest part is the headline on each of them, and we can see that one of them says Marty the dog wins award and refuses to give speech, which is pretty obvious, considering dogs do not talk, right? But the most shocking news is with the middle customer, where his newspaper says that Santa Claus robbed the bank. I kind of think he does not have time for that, since he is always getting ready for Christmas. And it makes perfect sense that he is reading about this, since we later find out that he was a police officer the whole time. And the Shoeshine Boy's last customer is reading a newspaper that says, "Good news, everyone is rich," which was for sure a long shot from reality back then, let alone from the reality of today. Which goes to show that today is not the only time when nobody believes the news. In the scene where the gang tries to intimidate the robot outside a sci-fi event, he accidentally throws the leader of the group right through the store window. And at that moment, we can spot a very interesting detail. There is a poster with July 5th to 10th written on it. And in case you did not know, practically all the movies in the franchise make a reference to this month, because that is when 3 of the best movies in the franchise were released. Despicable Me hit theaters on July 9th, 2010. The first solo Minions movie came out on July 10th, 2015, which is the exact date written on the glass. And the latest movie in the franchise, Despicable Me 4, premiered on July 3rd, 2024. And Minions and Monsters also just premiered now, on July 2nd. In other words, July is the global month of the Minions. And if there is one thing that Illumination does incredibly well, it is packing their movies full of details that practically no one notices. In that exact same sci-fi convention scene, before getting knocked out by the robot, the gang was bullying a poor guy who was doing a green alien cosplay. And notice that when they look over at the robot, the guy simply sneaks away from there. But the most interesting part is that after the bad guys are all passed out, if you look closely, while the robot is talking to the minions who want to make him their leader, that same guy who ran away from the gang is hiding and listening to the conversation from behind the candy cart. I only noticed this on the 3rd time I watched the scene. What about you? When they are over at the robot's house, which is a really small apartment that he shares with someone else, we can see some of the minions lying on the bed, and one of them is reading one of the greatest classics of literature, Moby Dick, the story of the white whale that destroys a whaling ship out of sheer revenge. Maybe she could be a pretty good boss for the minions, do you not think? Right in the very first scene where we see one of the new main minions of the story, which in this case is James, back in the days of ancient Greece, we can see that behind him, the little yellow beings made a version of themselves, using things that they most definitely found on the beaches they walked across, and with a mean face, perhaps to intimidate the Kraken, who lived in those Greek waters in the past. And we can also see an ancient times version of that exact same pet rock that Otto traded for the magical medallion that Gru had snatched from the hands of the Vicious Six. Maybe that rock already belonged to Otto, and this was a way for the production team to show this detail to the fans. Keep in mind that it is also in a minion version, even if it is not painted yellow. Shortly after, the minions managed to find their next evil boss, a giant Cyclops, who who loved to stomp on absolutely everything. The problem was that he ended up stepping on the stone Lego pieces that James had created to honor him. And after a series of terrible things that happened back to back, he fell off a cliff and almost died. But the interesting detail is that in the scene where we see James painting the stone Lego pieces, if you look closely, you will notice that a few minions are walking by carrying a sandal in the background. And if the giant Cyclops had been wearing it, he probably would not have fallen off the cliff. At least, not on that particular day. The coolest part is that later on, when we see him completely covered in casts and broken up because of what happened, we can see that one of the minions wrote "Pori" on the cast on the giant's arm, which is basically a way of apologizing in their language. Now, if you made it this far, surely something in this video kept you hooked until now, so we certainly deserve your subscription.
For example, in the scene where James finds out what the Oscar is, when his director tells him about it, we can see that he imagines himself winning a statuette right next to his two best minion friends. And the interesting part is that if you pause the scene right when James's name is announced, you'll notice that next to Henry, there is a stylized soda cup from the Minions' very own brand. Right next to James himself, there's one too, next to the popcorn. And on Ed's seat, we have a lollipop, and right next to him, a toy figure of the Minions themselves as well. A lot of people didn't even realize it, but there is a lot of evidence in the animation showing that the monster that was going to be summoned at the end would be that orange blob full of eyes. For example, when the Minions and Goomy arrive at the island and enter the cave, if you look closely, you'll notice that the object used to unfreeze the two monsters on the island had a tiny eye symbol on its base. After that, right in the next shot when they are all leaving the cave, the engraving on the wall shows Goomy next to the two freshly unfrozen monsters and several eyes around them, which already hinted at the appearance of the monstrous orange blob. And later, when James actually thinks he is shooting a movie scene, but in reality Goomy is starting the summoning ritual, we can see that the altar he uses is completely decorated with several eyes once again. Honestly, we didn't see it because we weren't paying attention. But the movie was showing us the whole time, don't you agree? Our list of hidden secrets in Minions and Monsters is just getting started. Get ready, because we are going to blow your mind. As we all know very well, the animators at Illumination love creating scenes with the minions in the background doing extremely random things, especially when a bunch of them are gathered together. That is exactly what happened the moment Dort and Debbie are sitting on the park bench peacefully eating ice cream, and several of the minions are doing the exact same thing. But if you look really closely, you'll notice several bizarre things. For example, we can see one of the minions using two ice cream cones to pretend he is wearing a bra, while the other minion looks at him in a funny way. At the same time, we can see another minion opening his mouth thinking his buddy is going to feed him some ice cream, and he just takes an ice cream cone to his goggles so hard that he ends up falling backward. Furthermore, we could also see two minions using candy apples to make some sort of toast, as if they were champagne glasses at a fancy gala dinner. Actually, that is a pretty good idea. And we could also see a minion laying down on another minion's lap to sleep, which honestly is a pretty weird scene. When the minions have already become super famous in the movie world, we see James, who is one of the yellow protagonist beings of the third movie, grabbing a puff pad and throwing makeup on an actress's face in a not-so-subtle way, you could say. The funny thing is that it actually looks good. The detail here is that if you look behind the actress, you'll notice there is a black and white picture of that very same actress.
And if we go way back to the beginning of the movie, where we see the tourists walking into the cinema museum, we'll see that in one of the tribute spots, there is an identical picture of that exact same actress, indicating that she really became someone very, very famous. Could James's makeup have been responsible for that? Maybe you noticed this, maybe you didn't. The Bright brothers, owners of the studio where the Minions movies were made, were a bit on the chubby side. But not only that, they are huge fans of their own shapes, which is why they have several statues of themselves scattered all over the place, like the two Greek-style statues of them right behind the desk in their very own office. If you still don't know, it's better if we tell you right now. The Minions movies aren't exactly made just for kids. The proof of this happens in the scene on the first morning the Minions wake up in their new home, an abandoned Italian food factory. And when James says he has an idea for a new movie, if you look in the background, you'll see that the animators let it show that one of the Minions was still sleeping. So far, so good. But the bizarre detail is that he had his back turned and was completely naked. Was that really necessary? Definitely not, but it is really funny. Before we continue, just a quick heads up. If you also enjoy movies, series, and cartoons, click the subscribe button right now, alright? Still talking about the Minions' temporary home. Did you notice that the factory's name is Lara Violi, spelled separately? As much as it might seem like a name given in honor of the factory owner, who was probably a woman named Lara and was Italian, the pun is that the name is a reference to ravioli, which is one of the most famous Italian foods. Another detail that you probably missed when you were watching the Minions movie happens in the scene that starts off showing the front of the jazz club. And if you look closely, you'll notice that right in the corner of the scene, a couple in love goes in for a huge kiss. Ah, how great it is to be in love, don't you agree? While James, Henry, and Ed were heading to Monster Island with Gumi, the rest of the Minions finally managed to find a boss to call their own, the space robot Dort. The intergalactic conqueror with financial struggles ends up taking the group of yellow lackeys to his tiny apartment, where he introduces them to the friend he lives with. And we can see that while he is talking about his world domination plan, the Minions are listening closely, but not all of them can actually see him talking. That's because one of the Minions has the two pant legs from the drying rack right over the lenses of his goggles. The funniest part is that one of the Minions next to him notices the situation and starts laughing and pointing at the Minion who isn't seeing a thing.
Going back to the same train scene in the city, we noticed a very strange logic error. When the train is about to crash at the end of the alley, several characters who had appeared at different times during the Minions' chase show up to try to prevent the collision. And if you look closely, you'll notice that one of them is simply the exact same sheriff whose horse the Minions themselves had stolen a few minutes earlier, leaving him behind with all the other guys. But like magic, even with a runaway train tearing through downtown at about 200 miles per hour, how is it possible that this sheriff, even after having his horse stolen, managed to be right there to try to help? Another mistake that we can say was definitely intentional also happens in this same sequence of scenes. The Minions end up crashing into the factory where Charlie Chaplin himself was filming one of his greatest hits, the movie Modern Times. And notice that next to the silent film star, there is another factory worker who gets completely startled by the arrival of the Minions and the interruption of the production line. The detail here is that apparently Illumination's animators were on such a tight deadline to deliver the final movie that they decided to simply take Chaplin's same co-worker and cast him as the production crew member responsible for sweeping the hallway where the scene was being filmed. Now let's move on to another mistake that really caught our attention too. After the Minions witnessed Dort knocking out, even if unintentionally, the four bullies by himself at the sci-fi event, the little yellow guys are amazed and start looking at the robot as their new big boss. The whole problem is that if you think about it carefully, you'll realize that when Dort is talking to the Minions, we can see that next to all of them is a very large wall with several posters glued to it, right? But as soon as he finishes his speech, he starts walking exactly in the direction of that very same wall. But what we see in the next scene is an open street full of stores and cars. But how is that possible if there was a giant wall there just a moment ago? I wouldn't say anything if he had turned to the other side, but towards that side of the wall, it makes absolutely no sense. So, had you noticed that? Going back once again to the scene of the runaway locomotive passing through downtown, we managed to notice another mistake that kept our eyes wide open with the new Minions movie. You probably didn't even notice this, but right before the little yellow guys managed to steer the machine away from the mother who was crossing the street with her baby, we can notice that on a brick wall of one of the buildings, there is an ad for a milk brand called Milk. Very original name, by the way. This is definitely not a problem, especially because drinking milk is good for your bones. The mistake we noticed is that actually right after, when the minions need to make the train swerve again, only this time from a group of elderly people who were crossing the street, if you pause at the right moment and look again, you'll find the exact same ad painted on the exact same wall on the same building. So I ask myself, what are the odds of you finding such identical ads for the same product that fast in a city? That's exactly why we believe this is yet another mistake for our list. And that wasn't the only scene where things duplicate in the city where the minions are. Right after the minions manage to swerve the train away from the elderly folks, they keep dodging people in the middle of the street until they catch a clown who ends up stuck to the front of the locomotive. And it's at this exact moment that we can see a pretty cool thing. The city's movie theater, or would it be a theater? And in front of it, it says there is a new show for all showtimes. The strange thing is that while this group of minions on the train passes right in front of this venue, the other minions who are chasing the actor disguised as a thug pass right in front of the exact same place. The proof of this is that on the facade, the exact same sign is written with the announcement of a new show for all showtimes. Were the animators just recycling animation material once again? I'd guess yes. What about you? Now let's talk about a very interesting detail that isn't quite a mistake, but it's something we can say is intriguing to say the least. When we meet James, we realize he is a dreamer minion who loves to always be drawing his ideas, which is actually pretty cool. The proof of his dedication is the fact that his fingers are always smeared with paint colors that he must use in his drawings. For example, in the first scene we see him, his fingers are smeared with blue and pink. But the strange thing is that when we look at his drawing of the giant man-eating fish, we can even find the sea painted blue, but there is nothing pink in the drawing that could have managed to smear James's fingers with that color. So how did he get those practically permanent pink and blue stains on his hands? If this isn't a mistake, it's at least a great mystery. Skipping ahead a few years into the future, after the minions practically destroy the town where the new Western movie is being shot, the director goes running after the yellow beings once the twin brothers who own the studio love their acting. And at this moment, we can see that inside the studio, there are several posters featuring parodies of movies from that era that were highly successful. For example, we can see that they changed the name of the Count Dracula movie to Dr. Clawchula. While the director is looking for the minions, we can see references to several historical moments that actually happened in the United States back in the 1930s. Such as, for example, a group of police officers arresting a grocery store owner and dumping out a barrel that was full of illegal alcoholic beverages, which is a nod to the Prohibition era that took place during the time of Al Capone, the greatest gangster of all time. In that same vein, across the street, a women's march is shown demanding that they also be granted the right to universal female suffrage, which at the time was still a subject of major debate. When the minions step onto the movie set for the very first time, we can see that several different types of movies are being filmed there, including a Western where a bar fight scene is taking place. And it looks like one of the actors forgot that the whole thing was make-believe. So much so that not only does he smash a chair over the back of a fellow actor, but he punches another actor so hard that he falls onto a mattress. And if you look closely, you will notice that he spits a tooth out of his mouth. Going back now to the beginning of the movie, in the scene where the tour guide tells the lost history of the minions in the world of cinema, we can notice that the map where the story begins is completely filled with puns like blah blah boat, which is a mix of blah blah blah, which we all know what it means, plus the word boat, keeping everything in a minionese style, which is the language spoken by the minions. Right after that scene, looking at another part of the map that shows how the minions traveled around the world by canoe, we can find a really cool reference to one of Gru's daughters, since there is a place on the minions map called Margot Bay, which is exactly the name of our favorite villain's oldest daughter. Following the trend of weird names on the maritime map of the little yellow beings from the story that took place centuries before the very first Despicable Me movie, we can see that there is also a location called Mati Gru Oceanus, which is clearly a reference to the future leader of the Minions who appeared in the last two solo movies of the best villain sidekicks in the animation world, even though he was still just a kid. In fact, if we stop to think about it, the name of this place is basically a Minionese version that says something like Mighty Gru, proving that this is truly a tribute to Lucy's husband and the greatest boss the Minions have ever had. Another really cool detail on the map, which we are absolutely sure was made by the little yellow beings themselves, is that the minions called the land where they served the wizard simply Abracadabra. I have got to admit that this was just pure genius. Right at the very start of the movie, we can see that the present-day tour guide is taking a group through some sort of Hollywood cinema museum. And in that scene alone, we managed to find several references to historic movies that many of us were not even born yet when they were released. For instance, we can see a recreation of the classic scene featuring the lead boy from the movie E.T. the Extraterrestrial, a film from 1982, where the boy simply floats on his bicycle alongside the visitor from another world by the light of the moon. At the same time, if you look closely, you will also be able to spot a recreation of one of the most iconic scenes in the history of cinema, from the movie Jaws, where the giant killer fish practically destroys the main character's boat during the final showdown. The interesting thing is that this was the exact same movie that was playing at the movie theater where Minnie Gru let off a fart bomb in Minions 2. And you can also see a recreation of the cover for the 80s comedy movie Airplane, where the airplane gets tied up in a knot. Not to mention that the movie playing at the fake movie theater located inside the museum is none other than the classic movie Frankenstein, which we all know so very well.
Right after that, our eagle eyes managed to catch another detail that the movie's animators put in, so that Easter egg hunters like us could find it. One of the minions starts playing with Dort's roommate's socks, and everyone starts laughing. However, if you look in one of the corners of the apartment, there is one of the minions craning his neck so he can see what's going on. He can't manage to see it, so he looks around suspiciously and gives that awkward smile, just to pretend he got the joke. Who hasn't done that, right? On the other side of the world, James, Henry, and Ed, accompanied by Gumi, cross the ocean to get to Monster Island.
And we noticed a few very interesting details. The first one is that on the way there, apparently they stopped to catch some fish, since they have a basket full of them inside their little boat. More than that, if you look closely at the aerial shot, shortly after they save the baby seal, you'll notice that not only did they catch fish, but they also ate some, since we can see at least 2 fish bones. Now that's what I call liking fresh sushi. After the pseudo-robot Dort gets out of the bathroom, which is definitely something robots don't usually do, he announces that now they are finally going to begin their world domination plan, to the delight of the minions who celebrate. The detail here is that if you look closely, you'll realize that one of them just straight up throws a bra in the air. But at the end of the day, where did he even get that? In the scene where Dort plants his global domination flag at the children's playground, he ends up doing it right on top of a boy's sandcastle, who then starts hitting the robot with his little shovel. He then decides to kick the boy into space, but is interrupted by Debbie, a woman who is a member of the independent women's movement. And the interesting part is that if you look behind her, you'll notice there is an older lady who is also from the same group that just falls asleep out of nowhere. Seriously, the woman literally managed to take a nap standing up. I laughed so hard when I noticed this hidden detail. In this very same scene, something happens that only someone paying close attention to the main scene will catch. During this whole process of planting the flag, getting hit by the kid, and meeting Debbie, we can see that there is a whole game going on between a boy and a little girl in the background of the playground, where they try, but fail, to make a toy rocket stand upright. When Dort and Debbie go out on a romantic date, obviously the minions tag along with their master, helping him however they can to try and make a good impression on the girl. And when they are at an Italian restaurant, we can see that the minions are just eating a mountain of spaghetti. The detail is that at the top of this mountain, 2 minions accidentally end up recreating that famous spaghetti scene from the Disney classic called Lady and the Tramp, and the 2 of them just end up kissing. Meanwhile, at the bottom, we can see that minion who accidentally got whacked on the head by Dick, eating spaghetti all by himself. Speaking of the short minion, in the next scene where the minions, Dort, and Debbie are looking at the city lights from the top of a small hill, we can see that one of the minions keeps rubbing his head until he falls asleep. I have to admit, that scene was pretty cute. And if at any point during the movie Minions and Monsters, you were wondering exactly what year all of that was taking place, there is a scene that many didn't pay attention to, but that makes it clear exactly what year all of it happens. When James and Goomy start filming, he cuts the scene and uses a clapperboard where the year 1927 is clearly written, which is the year they are actually in during the movie. We've reached the end of this video, but if you like having your mind blown, this is the right place. That's why we left 2 really good videos for you to click, watch, and best of all, stay with us.